Greetings, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. My apologies. I had a stream scheduled and somehow I lost internet and sat there and rambled on for about 10 minutes before I realized it. Somehow we lost our internet connection here. So we're going to start it all over. So let me get set up here. We started out where we left off from the last night. And so let's see if we can find out where we're at here. So for those of you that have joined, please hit that like, share, and subscribe button. My last session kind of got cut short. And so it's going to be a few minutes. We're going to wait see if people come back. In the meantime, I just want to remind people it's important, again, to learn how to commit to your own negotiations. And in so doing, you have to learn the language that you're using on all these forms and everything as they were intended. And I can't stress enough that I think people need to go back and relearn everything they thought they know. Unlearn the things you thought you know and relearn everything again. And that goes back to that concise English handbook and a college composition handbook. Learn how the language of this modern time that we use is constructed, and it's called English. It's not an English of its own. It's merely nothing but adopting other languages. And this has happened throughout time. Each language just generally adopts forms from other languages to create their own. That's all it is. And in that, people think they know what the words they're using mean, and they don't. So learn how to get to the etymology of things and break things down. And to start with, I want to remind everybody that last night we started out with the term FIC, which comes from facere. And this is the English language adopting the E on it to make of vice, meaning of facere, to make, of the making. You are the maker of the data elements on those forms. You are the officer, just like I said that you are the customer. You customize the data elements that you are making. Quid pro quo, you have to act in the same capacity as the officer, but be distinguishedly different, knowing how the words and everything are used. So let's get on to the next one, which we left off last night at interest serving book entry postal service securities servicing, payment of interest, payment at maturity or upon call. And this is in relations to, again, the extension of credit. And on that form, I was allowed to put my specifics on there as denoting the species by specially putting that term on that document in credit, which is relative to Title 12 of the U.S. Code, banks and banking, and that definition of deposit, which we're going to be looking at here in a minute. First, we're going to look at this term extension of credit, which I want to remind everybody, this banks and banking is the Federal Reserve System, Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, loans to executive officers, directors, and principal shareholders of member banks. The post office is, in fact, a banking system, and it has its own officers, directors, and principal shareholders through the Postal Realty Trust, Inc., which has a filing of public offerings to the or through the Securities Exchange Commission. Those certificates as public offers hold an obligation and a liability. Just like that form they gave me, 6387. That form 6387 is backed by that trust. It's an offer from the Postal Service, and therefore the backing is from the Postal Service as the registered agent, and they're the ones that hold the real estate investment trust. And as I do these next few videos on this, I'll show you who the board of governors are and all of that. As it goes to extension of credit, an extension of credit is a making or renewal of any loan. So remember, it's to make. You are the officer of your own office. Whether you like to think so or not, it's the same thing. It's an equivalent. So let's get back to it. A granting of a line of credit or an extending of credit in any manner whatsoever. So here, the term granting indicates a trust by the use of the term granting. In so doing, this relates to the online enterprise payment system that I established with the Postal Service as the Keith Orland Little FBU Trust. I am the creator of that trust, and it is my credit I wish to be extended. Of a line of credit, a purchase under repurchase agreement of securities, other assets, or obligations. The Postal Service has the obligation because they're the one with the certificates as a public offering. Okay? You can purchase them to be a shareholder. That's a security. It's an asset. It's an obligation of the United States Postal Service as registered agents of the post office, trademark holder. In advance by any means of an overdraft, and I didn't draft it over any amount, I drafted it for the amount because that was the unpaid balance of money or its equivalent. And I can't pay that, but I can extend the credit. Just like the post office can extend credit through their making, I can extend credit through my making. Cash item or otherwise. And I gave them by advance, by giving it to them, a cash item. I advanced it from my position to their position as it relates to the holding of the cash item. Once I do that, it's in their possession, and they are a trust. That's trust property now because I granted it to them, gave it to them, so they can invest it in their trust. The exchange is the unpaid balance of the money or its equivalent, as I stated specifically on the instrument in credit. Issuance of a standby letter of credit. Now, if I stand by the post office as an alliance, as an ally, then don't we have a shared credit? What is a letter of credit? You suppose that Constitution operates as a letter of credit, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, needful places and buildings, or other similar arrangements regardless of name or description, or an ineligible acceptance as those terms are defined in section 208.24 of this chapter. And that relates to whether you've actually got assets that you can build in development to be able to make a public offering of certificates. As an individual, I don't have that, so I'm ineligible to make that. So the record that was created was accepted in ineligibility. That's why I say it's a matter of correcting the record. There was an ineligible acceptance into the record that caused all of this. And acquisition, again, we discussed the federal acquisitions regulations, 48 CFR 52.212-5, contract terms and conditions required to implement statutes, commercial services and commercial products. So in so doing, that instrument known as negotiable instrument form 6387 is for an acquisition of credits by discount through a purchase of which there is a Securities Exchange Commission agreement with the post office, or otherwise of any note, draft. These two particular terms we're going to be talking about here shortly in regards to the UCC and negotiable instrument and what they mean. Bill of exchange or other evidence of indebtedness. Other evidence of indebtedness. That little R as a registered agent is the evidence of indebtedness as a trustee to the grantee, who is the trademark holder, to extend their products and services in offer, as an offer in formation of a contract. That's an offer in formation of a contract. That's the evidence of indebtedness. When you start placing those values on there, according to the way the letter of the law is written, as a directive for special deposit into a financial institution that then is obligated to extend credit or give credit, or is already given credit. This is important. Again, like I said, that homemade stamp is specific. It says specially or specifically prepaid. And then it's got its routing number for the credit that is already there, upon which an insider may be liable as maker. The insider in this case, again, is the post office as the trademark holder on the names and numbers of the certificates that are exchanged through the Securities Exchange Commission through PSTL on the New York Stock Exchange. And they are the drawer, endorser, guarantor, and surety. Again, that registered agent. They are the trustee. They are the surety. Let me check the board and see if anybody's wanting to come up. Okay, the link is down there if anybody wants to join the panel. Remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button for me to help the analytics and algorithm. If you're on Hecklebus, get over to El Perro and do the same. If you're on El Perro, get over to Hecklebus. I want to say thanks to everybody for joining me. I know we kind of got shut off earlier with the loss of internet there, lost the connection, so we lost our viewers. Please hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Let people know I'm back up. And in the meantime, let's get back to it, because the next one is that definition of deposit. And we're going to see it both in 12 USC 1813 as definitions, as well as 12 CFR 204.2 definitions. And as we note, the codification is in the U.S. Code, and the regulation, the enforcement, is in the Code of Federal Regulations. This is where everything's enforced It shows you that the definition is concurrent and therefore it is valid, known as positive law. So let's go down and look at definition of deposit as used in the usual course of business. The term deposit means the unpaid balance of money or its equivalent received or held by a bank or savings association in the usual course of business. And like I said, that post office has cash registers and operates functionally just like a bank, and for which it has given or is obligated to give credit. The unpaid balance of money or its equivalent received or held by a bank or savings association in the usual course of business and for which it has given or is obligated to give credit. Those stamps, that's their obligation. That's what they've given credit for. They've already made the exchange. That's why you use Federal Reserve notes to buy them from them. That's a promise to pay. You buy a Federal Reserve, you use a Federal Reserve note to buy a stamp. That's a like kind instrument. You could likewise attach a $1 bill to the front of the envelope where the stamp goes, and they would accept it. They should. Either conditionally or unconditionally. Now, this is where the specifics are. Conditionally, I put on there with special drawing rights because I'm that special. I can draw on that instrument. And I put on there in credit. To a commercial, checking, savings, time, or thrift account. So is it a commercial account? Everything that has a dollar amount attached to it is a commercial account. You'll notice that every account has a commercial value to it. Therefore, it is a commercial accounting. Bureau of Vital Statistics, the enumeration at birth, that establishes a commercial accounting. How do we know this? Because the Bureau of Vital Statistics is, in fact, regulated by the Department of Commerce. Or which is evidenced by its certificate of deposit, thrift certificate, investment certificate, certificate of indebtedness, or other similar name. And these are the investment certificates that we're talking about with the Securities Exchange Commission. So it is evidenced by its certificate of investment, which are public offering, again, through their SEC filings. You can look up their SEC trust indenture. I believe it's executive document 4.3. Or a check or draft. Oops. Remember, I told you that term was going to be important. We're going to look that up here soon. Check or draft drawn against a deposit account and certified by the bank or savings association. Again, it's the post office that's the certifier here in this situation. And it is a deposit account simply by the action of depositing, depositioning that coin from my hands to their hands, or a letter of credit or traveler's check on which the bank or savings association is primarily liable. So by offering a rural money order transaction application, they are stating they are primarily liable on it. It is a negotiable instrument that as long as the negotiations are true and correct to the form, they will certify it. In other words, they will support it with one of those certificates, the shareholder certificates, their assets. That's what backs it. Provided that, without limiting the generality of the term money or its equivalent, any such account or instrument must be regarded as evidencing the receipt of the equivalent of money when credited or issued in exchange for checks or drafts, or for a promissory note upon which the person obtaining any such credit or instrument is primarily or secondarily liable. Receipt of the equivalent of money when credited or issued in exchange for checks or drafts or for a promissory note. When credited. When was it credited? Was the enumeration at birth credited? It had to have been. If it didn't have credit, they wouldn't have allowed it in the record. It would have been ineligible to be entered into the record. So therefore, they only entered it in the record because they thought it was creditable data elements. So when they entered it into the record, it was credited. When credited. Since that time, every credit or instrument, we became a secondary liability, authorized representative, and we have been held to that secondary liability all of this time. I have no secondary liability if I'm not handling any more of those instruments and I'm only accepting their offer as an accommodation by use of that instrument. UCC 3-11, again, I said we'll be talking about that here shortly. Or for a charge against a deposit account. So when they created that enumeration at birth and deposited it, it created a deposit account. And that is the deposit account we are trying to establish as a need for a correction. It was not meant to establish a deposit account for a corporate entity. It should have never happened. That the deposit account should never be created until the corporation is created. It should not be established at the beginning of a development. There are certain negotiations that have to be done first, and these can be seen in 12 USC 614 for banking and banking institutions, or banks and banking. There's a process of communicating with the Federal Reserve. Just like the last one, that extension of credit. It's the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve that they're communicating through. And it's all considered a loan. Loan of what? You didn't loan me any assets. Everybody thinks they're getting loans, and they're loaning you what? Federal Reserve notes, which are promises to pay that you're not even supposed to be touching. They're supposed to be in advance to other Federal Reserve institutions by transfer agents. Are you a transfer agent accepting them so that then you can turn around and advance them to somebody else? No, you're not. You're supposed to be advancing coin as the asset so that then the extension of credit can occur. So the next one is or in settlement of checks, drafts, or other instruments forward to such bank or savings associations for collection. And this is what we're doing, is we're negotiating, trying to settle things. Trust funds, as defined in this chapter, received or held by such bank or savings association, whether they're held in the trust department or held or deposited in any other department of such bank or savings association. So when I give them that number in lieu of the name and address, it expresses the trust as defined, and that asset is now being held by a trustee in that trust. Money received or held by a bank or savings association, or the credit given for money. The credit given for money or its equivalent received or held by bank or savings association in the usual course of business for a special or specific purpose, regardless of the legal relationship thereby established. So the legal relationship matters not. That is the contract. This is a matter of private law. It is not a matter of legalities inside a public trust wherein trustees are running around telling on each other, including without being limited to escrow funds. Funds held as security for an obligation due to the bank or savings association or others, or for securities loaned by the bank or savings association. Funds deposited by a debtor to meet maturing obligations. Funds deposited by a debtor. Now, when you pay that Social Security and that FICA, it goes to the state, who is oftentimes named as plaintiff in these financial statutes that are being offended, supposedly. On Form A0430, it expressly tells us the plaintiff is the debtor. And the funds deposited by that debtor are those said Social Security and FICA funds deposited by the state. They are deposited into a general fund for which the federal government then matches those funds. And you are not given credit for those in that deposit. What happens is you are given insurance credits that are established through the Social Security Administration. The use of those credits is by use of the number on the front or the number on the back. The use of those credits on the front is either through its original intent as the beneficiary, as the number is Social Security with 2 dashes, or as an obligation or liability. The conversion, which is without the dashes. The number on the back, same thing. It's got its original form, which places a liability in a certain place. Converting that, it places the liability in its proper place. And that liability is to extend, or the obligation is to extend credit. Funds deposited as advance payment on subscriptions to United States securities. United States government securities, United States. Federal government means all entities of the government of the United States, including the United States Postal Service registered agent and the Postal Regulatory Commission. And once again, it's the Postal Service that has the real estate investment trust creating those securities. Those are the advance payments. That's what all the entities of the United States subscribe to, is for the US dollar, not the Federal Reserve. Funds held for distribution or purchase of securities. Funds held to meet its acceptances or letters of credit and withheld taxes. Funds held to meet its acceptances and thereby extending their credit, or funds which are received by the bank or savings association for immediate application to the reduction of an indebtedness. So do you suppose the reduction of an indebtedness would just be the transfer of credits and not the requirement of another asset? Cash or debit. Reduction of the indebtedness. So if you give cash, is there a debit? No. So what is cash? Cash, again, is the fiat currency. It's the paperwork. Legal tender today is negotiable instruments. That is what's known as cash. To the receiving bank or savings association, application to the reduction of indebtedness to the receiving bank or savings association. So the application is for the reduction of indebtedness by converting it to credit, so nobody else has to give up an asset. Nobody else is held liable in any court under the directive for 50 U.S.C. 4305 in the interest of the United States. I am the principal of the interest. The United States' interest is in the obligation, in the interest of the United States' obligation, and I am the principal of that obligation. It's their obligation to protect and serve, or under condition that the receipt thereof immediately reduces or extinguishes such an indebtedness. Again, under that directive, where no person shall be held liable in any court under a full acquittance and discharge. I'm hoping everybody's with me still. Yeah, Top G, I've been kind of scrambling, so I don't have my likes up yet. They'll have to wait until afterwards. And yes, they are known as duty stamps. Sam Gold knows what he's talking about. Duty stamps. Duty stamps, duty stamps. They have a duty because they are their stamps. Philatelic duty. All right. So let's get on to the next one, which is the regulation. That one was the U.S. Code codification. And this one here is the regulation enforcement under 12 CFR 204.2. Again, definitions. And we see an almost identical definition, almost identical. The unpaid balance of money or its equivalent received or held by a depository institution. Now we change from a bank or savings association to a depository institution. Like I said, in the usual course of business, and for which it has given or is obligated to give credit, either conditionally or unconditionally, to an account. In providing an agreement with the Treasury The Postal Service Fund extended credit to the United States through the use of its agreement with the Federal Reserve of Federal Reserve notes. The Judicial Office determined with the Federal Reserve that they would allow the administrative offices, known as the executive, legislative, and administration. Even the executive office is an administration of a military fashion. Either conditionally or unconditionally to an account, including interest credited. And this is why we name it in the interest of the United States, because that's where that credit was extended already. And that's that enumeration at birth, where you are a creditor to that whole system of records. Without you, they have nothing to administrate for the initial gross domestic product of any corporate entity, or which is evidenced by an instrument on which the depository institution is primarily liable. So again, as I said, it's an offer in formation of contract, because you can put contract terms and conditions on that instrument as you see fit. Okay. Under UCC 3-311, it's accommodation by use of instrument. UCC 3 is the securities code. Tells us in UCC 9-307, the debtor is located in in Washington, D.C. and is known as the United States. The United States is the one that has the credit that was extended by the SEC Postal Realty Trust, Investment Trust, in their agreement with the Postal Service to fund their treasury. Okay. So let's look at the next one. UCC 3-104, negotiable instrument as it's defined. Except as provided in section C and D, negotiable instrument means an unconditional promise or order to pay a fixed amount of money with or without interest or other charges described in the promise or order of it. So as it sits, there aren't any conditions on it. So it's an unconditional one, and you get to put your conditions on it. Okay? B, instrument means a negotiable instrument. C, an order that meets all of the requirements of subsection A, except paragraph 1. Is payable to bearer or to order at the time it is issued, or first comes into possession of a holder. It was not paid to the bearer, and it was not paid to order. It was a money order transaction application, rural money order transaction application, and it did not say pay to, it just said pay. Or excuse me, it did not say pay to the order of, it just said pay to or pay. It was not payable on demand and falls within the definition of a check in subsection F, is a negotiable instrument and a check. A promise or order other than a check is not an instrument if at the time it is issued or first comes into possession of a holder, it contains a conspicuous statement, however expressed, to the effect that the promise or order is not negotiable or is not an instrument governed by this article. I didn't do that. E, an instrument is a note if it is a promise and is a draft if it is an order. If an instrument falls within the definition of both note and draft, a person entitled to enforce the instrument may treat it as either. Check means a draft other than a documentary draft, payable on demand and drawn on a bank or a cashier's check or teller's check. Payable on demand and drawn on a bank or cashier check. So I took their draft, put my conditions on it, hand it back to them, and in that they draw up a postal money order with a pay to the order of, which is the same form as a check. An instrument may be a check even though it is described on its face by another term such as money order. So that form 6387 is in fact an offer for them to write up such check by you using it as a draft to put your conditions on it so that they can draw the money order. Because what I've filled out is a money order application. Is that making sense, folks? Let me see here. Because the next one I want to use is the UCC 3-311 accommodation, or excuse me, accord and satisfaction by use of instrument. Okay. This is where we have an issue. Because under UCC 3-11, it says accord and satisfaction by use of instrument. And under UCC 3-419, it says instruments signed for accommodation. If an instrument is issued for value given for the benefit of a party to the instrument, accommodated party, that would be my companion, and another party to the instrument, accommodation party, signs the instrument for the purpose of incurring liability on the instrument without being a direct beneficiary of the value given for the instrument is signed by the accommodation party for accommodation. So when I put my number down there in lieu of the name and address, I can sign it for accommodation. I don't have to put my name on it or anything. It doesn't say to put your name and then for accommodation. It just simply says for accommodation. Okay. Accommodation, however, is not the same as accord and satisfaction. Accord and satisfaction. If a person against whom a claim is asserted So I'm making the claim against the United States Postal Service. That is the person, the registered agent, proves that the person in good faith tendered an instrument to the claimant as full satisfaction of the claim. The amount of the claim was unliquidated or subject to a bona fide dispute, and the claimant obtained payment of the instrument. The following subsections apply. And the claimant obtained payment of the instrument. I haven't obtained payment of the instrument yet. So accord and satisfaction hasn't, by use of instrument, has not been had. But if it is, unless subsection C applies, the claim is discharged. If the person against whom the claim is asserted proves that the instrument or an accompanying written communication contained with a conspicuous statement to the effect that the instrument was tendered as full satisfaction of the claim. 50 U.S.C. 4305B2. Full acquittance and discharge wherein no person shall be held liable in any court. That did go along with my communications in all steps with everybody I've spoken to. I'm not here to claim anybody liable in a court. It is, in fact, a release of the liability by accommodation or by satisfaction, accord and satisfaction by use of the instrument for accommodation. I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for the accommodation of my partner. I am the accommodation party. I am the go-between. Subject to Section D, a claim is not discharged under B if either of the following applies. The claimant, if an organization proves that within a reasonable time before the tender, the claimant sent a conspicuous statement to the person against whom the claim is asserted that communications concerning disputed debts, including an instrument tendered as full satisfaction of a debt, are to be sent to a designated person, office, or place. The instrument or accompanying communication was not received by that designated person, office, or place. So far, I sent it in electronic form to the Board of Governors of the Postal Service. It did not reach them. I offered it to the people that I met face-to-face down at the local post office. They did not accept it. I've done that twice. 3 times a charm, baby. The claimant, whether or not an organization proves that within 90 days after payment of the instrument, the claimant tendered repayment of the amount of the instrument to the person who the claim is asserted. Again, if it's prepaid, then there is no repayment. It's already prepaid. That account will assert that. And that's the claim, that it was already tendered by my mother. And everything I've done in my life, signing documents, establishing insurance credits. Ask the Social Security Administration if I have insurance credits. I don't give a fuck what you call that account. They're called insurance credits, and that is the credit I am extending. I have already earned it. It's there. This paragraph does not apply if the claimant is an organization that sent a statement complying with paragraph 1. This paragraph does not apply if the claimant is an organization. You cannot be an organization. You cannot do this as a corporate organization. What's that tell you? It tells you this is availed to the individual living soul only, no one else. No one else. And so I tell you again, you're not supposed to be signing those documents. You're not supposed to be dealing with those administrative courts. You're supposed to be learning how to negotiate things so that you don't get caught up in twisted contracts that have you paying out the ass when you already have a credit. It's already been established. This, again, is the merits. It's a military system that works on merits and demerits. And merits literally means spiritual credit. That's what you bring. The negotiations are the peace. Come in peace. I am in peace. I will pass in peace. In good faith tendered. So remember, folks, yes, Postal Service Form, PS Form 6387. Look at that, read it, ask all the questions you want from me of it. I will answer every question you have. If I don't have the answer, we will research it and find out. But that's why I go through this already. I've been through this stuff numerous times. That's why I'm able to pull this stuff up off the top of my head. I've researched this enough that I know there is no argument about it. It is written, and it is the letter of the law. It is in plain writing, and it is very comprehensible to those that know the English language well enough to be able to comprehend its construction. So again, remember, folks, God bless. I love you, and I don't give a fuck whether you love me back. I'll see you again tomorrow night with the next video. Might even come back with a couple shorter videos in the meantime. So remember, folks, hit that like, share, and subscribe button. If you're on Hecklebus, get over to El Perro, subscribe over there so you get notifications, hit those notification bells. And there are PayPal links in the details for anybody that wants to share some love. The top one is for those that have PayPal accounts. The one at the bottom, if you don't have a PayPal account, use that one. I am coming up with a Cash App here pretty soon. Still trying to get it figured out why the new phone with its new number, I get all kinds of notifications since I set up a Cash App with this number for somebody else's fucking Cash App, and they can't figure it out. So I don't even have access to get online and access my own Cash App that I've already established to set it to provide a link. So, because otherwise, if I do, it's going to provide the other guy's link and everything is going to go to his account. This is the importance of knowing how to do all this routing, folks. So, again, just like we just read, it's a matter of communicating with them to make sure the routing is proper. That's all I'm doing. That's all I'm doing is making sure the routing is proper. The funds are already there. They exist. I have a name attached to them. So do you. So, again, remember. Yes, 3-301 person entitled to enforce instrument. Yes. UCC 3 is a valid section that I've put up a couple of videos a few years back on the basics of the UCC, and that's 1-308, a reservation of rights. That simple reservation of rights is I don't want to deal with you. Not only do I not want to deal with you, but I'm not capable of dealing with you. You're an administrative court under a corporate entity known as an organization. I'm not organized under the Federal Reserve 12 U.S.C. 614. Those are the communications I was just speaking about in this video about being organized. I'm not organized. I don't have those communications. You're not supposed to be communicating with me. Period. So God bless and have a good night, folks.